Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Derek Decloet. I'm the Canada Managing Editor for Bloomberg News. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Marc-André Blanchard to our fixed income conference. He was Canada's ambassador to the United Nations for the past 4 years until recently, and has now joined the Caisse de Dépôt as Executive Vice President and Head of CDPQ Global, the international operations of La Caisse. Welcome to you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to thank National Bank Financial also for sponsoring it. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes, thank you to National Bank of Canada. And let's jump right in. Not only is this a new job for you, but it's also a new role for La Caisse. So why don't you tell the audience a bit about what you do and where your energies are focused?
Well, everybody knows about La Caisse to a large extent. You know that it's the second largest institutional investor in Canada, that we have close to $330 billion under asset management. We are strongly diversified, but what maybe people don't know as well is that today we're about a third of our investments are in Canada, a third in the US, and a third in the rest of the world. And we have 10 offices throughout the world that allow us to actually build partnerships and capture local information and business opportunities and help. The goal is to help La Caisse continue to enhance its global approach and actually leverage better our knowledge that is across the globe. So you also know that for example we're the top 15 largest global investors in the world, but we're the third in infrastructure. And in infrastructure, we own all sorts of things like airports, transports, public transit, renewable energy, natural gas pipeline, ports, and around the world. And 90% of our assets at La Caisse are managed internally. So you can imagine that creates all sorts of needs and for information, for coordination, for working better together, all of the asset classes to actually develop opportunities and manage investments and a greater presence. It's all about assessing the risk properly. So this is one part of the job. The other part of the job is partnership, making sure that we are the first call on by the best partners throughout the world. And that is also making sure that we leverage the value of La Caisse and what we bring to actually make sure that we maximize these partnerships. And I would say since I've began working just 3 weeks ago, and I'm new to the investment field. So, but one thing that has come out a lot is in all corners of the world, governments are now more important than they were before the pandemic. So that actually has enhanced or increased the demand for all sorts of things in relation to not only government relations, but also intelligence. And we know that we will need social licenses for some of our infrastructure. We know that we will need to foresee some regulatory changes that will actually change the nature of the risk that we are undertaking, or even the value of some of our investment. So all of these things are becoming more important. And there was the leadership of Charles Lemont, our new CEO, that thought we needed better coordination on all of these issues. So that's what I'm doing. That's my role.
So with only 1/3 of the assets, and this is obviously a huge pool of capital you're dealing with, well over $300 billion. Only 1/3 of the assets outside of the US and Canada. Do you foresee that percentage might rise? And if so, how might the case approach that problem of international diversification and the risks that come with it?
Well, we would like to have a little bit more investments in some developed countries. In Western Europe, for example, we are focusing on some French and German investments, and also some Scandinavian opportunities. And we have a strong foothold in the UK already. In Southeast Asia, we're looking at expanding our our reach in Japan and Korea, to name only these two countries. And then you have the emerging markets where we've been present in the last 4 or 5 years: India, Brazil, Mexico, and a few others where in Colombia, where we've really bought some and got involved in some cases. It's in infrastructure, in some cases it's in private equity stuff, and we will continue. But obviously, that's where you need really good market intel, good an ability to assess the risk properly, and to actually be connected locally to make sure that actually you understand what you're doing, and that you not only develop opportunities, minimize risk, and obviously we're in the business of making sure we get good returns.
So are you in a position to sort of increase the talent that you've got internally in some of those international offices, or are you looking for more outside partnerships in those places? How will you handle that?
It's going to be all of the above.
Gathering. Yeah,
it's all of the above. I mean, you need good partners. The good local partners will bring you good intel and actually good ability to connect with the authorities or with the stakeholders of some investments. But you also need good advisors, and so we have developed a group of advisors that will continue to develop around the world, that actually are not necessarily full-time employees of La Caisse, but come in and out for some specific and some specialized advice or some regional advice. And then we have the head of offices. So we have 3 hubs: one in New York City for the United States and Latin America, the other in London for the UK and Europe, and then we have one in Singapore for the Asia Pacific region. So these hubs we have a few dozen people in each of these hubs that actually some of them are from the asset classes and direct link with the asset classes in Canada, and some of them, like the head of office, is usually someone that actually can make connection, open doors, get market intel, and actually develop some opportunities, and obviously help with some of the risks involved.
Right. I'd like to ask you about climate change, because the case, going back even to Mr. Sabia as the previous CEO, discussed climate a lot as a big investment theme. I know that you're relatively new in the job, but can you tell us how you think about the problem of climate change, how it affects investment decisions, and how it might affect, what the case will do?
So let me talk to you once, just a little bit about from my perspective at the UN on this. I can tell you now, we believe that governments around the world in developed economies have poured a lot of money in the COVID-19 situation, but I think that will only accentuate the problem we had before that, which is that governments, whether you're from a developed country and even less from a developing country, have no resources to actually build the infrastructure needed to actually fight climate change. And this is, when I was ambassador of Canada to UN, I was always going to the private sector and say, don't wait for the government to do anything on this. The government can do a few things like regulate and make some minor investment here and there and some tweaks, but it's up to the private sector. Without the allocation, a better allocation of capital, just the better alignment of capital with sustainable development, we're going to fail in this issue of fighting climate change. And at La Caisse, and one of the things that attracted me at La Caisse was that La Caisse was such a great, actually, world leader in this issue of the fight of climate change and the leadership amongst institutional investors. So we have an approach to play a constructive role in the transition to a low carbon economy. We focus on managing climate related risk efficiently, and actually we also see a lot of opportunities resulting from the transition. So you mentioned Michael Sabia. 3 years ago, we under the leadership of Michael Sabia, there was some quantitative targets in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and reductions were actually set. and we had some targets for low carbon investments. So, they were at first they appeared very ambitious, those targets, and it's a challenge in some ways, but we all made it happen. It took a lot of collaboration across our teams. It took also the compensation to be aligned with those objectives. That's an important point. And so, we have two targets. We have the first one is increasing our low carbon investment by 80% between 2017 and 2020. And at this point, we have managed to actually exceed this number. So we did more than 80%. And we doubled the value of low carbon assets to reach 34 billions at the end of 2019. And so we're looking at this number to continue to grow, but this is a success story. And the second one was a target about reducing our carbon intensity per dollar invested by 25% by 2025. So to achieve this goal, we attribute carbon budgets to each of our portfolios in all of our asset classes. And this governance tools allow us to set annual carbon intensity limits per portfolio. And so teams, they include that in these carbon budgets in their annual strategic planning, and assess the carbon footprint of each investment decision that they do. So we need to reduce as a whole our holdings in high carbon intensity assets. We need to acquire low carbon assets. And also the third part, which is a big part for La Caisse, is to actually improve the practices adopted by our portfolio companies through our engagement with them. And we make sure that we are very transparent about it, that actually we report on these targets every year, and that it's in our stewardships report. And as I said before, we have 34 billion in low carbon assets. And we have, like, just give you an idea of what we have. We're very strong in transportation in Spain and Australia and Canada. In Canada, this is a very interesting point, because that's a differentiator for La Caisse and other institutional investors. We are financing, designing, and building a clean light rail system in the Montreal region, and so this is important, because actually this is a model that will probably be able to actually, to some degrees, maybe not as the entire thing, but to actually use that precedent, to actually use that to actually develop further opportunities around the world. And there are many jurisdictions that are looking at this model and asking us how we're doing it. And but that presents a partnership with the government that is different than what was done before. So we need, and that's the link with the UN. The UN, before I was on the UN ICE before, and it's all about creating new platforms and new ways of interacting the private sector and government to actually make sure that capital is better aligned with sustainable development. Well, it's a bit the same thing here. It's just more micro and applied to specific projects. And so this is how the case also became the number one in the world in renewables, basically. And we have close to $13.5 billion in renewable, and we have $900 million in green bonds. So these are all examples. And in fixed income, we have in Barcelona, we lent money to refinance a public-private partnership contract to build and operate metro stations in Barcelona. And so these are examples. In Australia, we are investing as part of a public-private partnership for trains and systems and operation and maintenance of the Sydney metro system, the largest public transit project in Australia. So we believe that actually the opportunities where the best returns and consideration of the risk will be that sort of opportunities when we're talking about infrastructure and the like.
I'd just like to remind our audience that if you can submit a question on the right-hand side of your screen if you have a question for our guest. Let's talk briefly about globalization. You spent 4 years at the UN. Now you're responsible for a collection of offices around the world. Some people think that globalization is, if not dead, at least on the wane. Is it?
I am not a believer. I know I'm a contrarian to a large extent on this, and this is my personal view. I think globalization is not over. I think maybe you could have globalization, that's as some people are talking about. I think there will this look at the supply chain. The supply chains are all integrated together around the world, and that will remain. There will be some regionalization of supply chains in some specific areas where it's of national interest or regional interest because of the politics of it. Yes, there will be some of that. There will be some, enhanced focus nationally and regionally in the Americas, for example, about do we have in the Americas, the essential supply chain that we need? Yes, but people will look at that regardless of the result of the election on November 3rd. But that will not stop globalization. In some corners, it's going to be a different kind of globalization. But I actually believe the interdependence is there, and it's so deep that actually and look at the main challenges we're facing in the world. What are the inequalities and climate change? These two challenges need what is the answer to this? It's a massive build of infrastructure all over the world, and no country either acting unilaterally or bilaterally, and no company, no investor can do it on his own or its own. And so you will need the multilateral arrangement, the multilateral platforms. They may be subsets of the big multilateral tools that we know and that we have, but still we need to collaborate amongst ourselves. And there's a role, and this is an opportunity for Canada. There's a huge opportunity for Canada at the moment. I'm very bullish on Canada because in Canada we have a lot of the talent and a lot of the expertise that will be needed in the post-COVID world. And actually, we just need to be a little bit more audacious in the way we do it. And we need to create the platforms in Canada to actually develop some global strategy. And we need to work with each other and develop the clusters properly, and to actually bring the expertise needed, whether it's financial services in some cases, the agro business, all sorts of digital expertise, the clean tech stuff, and I think pension funds are a part of that ecosystem where we need to work with each other, but we also need to work with some partners. And at La Caisse, that's the very interesting thing about the mandate of La Caisse. La Caisse is return to shareholders, and another part of the mandate is the economic development of Quebec. So I'm actually very surprised, not pleasantly surprised, and I knew it could be there, but how easy it is to leverage the network of La Caisse for actually our Quebec partners to actually develop opportunities abroad. And this is something that we need to do across the board in Canada, and all of us. And when we think about that, because if not, look at the geopolitics of this world. It's capital has a very big role to play in all of this. It goes with the future of the planet and how we see the planet, but also the future well-being of our own country.
We've got a good question from the audience who noticed earlier when you were talking about international markets, you didn't really mention China, and your Asian hub is in Singapore, not in Shanghai, where you also have an office. Are you less bullish? Is the case less bullish on China than on some of these other places?
Well, I should have mentioned China. It's just my own mistake. We have significant investments in the marché boursier, in the stock markets in China, and we have limited private equity play there. But this is a market that we're looking very closely at the moment, and that we will likely increase our investments in the near future to the midterm. And the other part that I wanted to talk about in the post pandemic situation, and to the people that are on the call, I just want us to be careful about that. Has nothing to do with the question that was asked, but this is something I should have mentioned from my UN role, and I just want to leave you with that. In 2008, 2009, only 24 countries asked the IMF for assistance because they were about to default on their financial situation. And just think about that now. There's more than 110 countries that already has asked the IMF for assistance. So this is a major. This I don't know what will be the impact of that, but I just want you to be aware of that. I think it's an important point in a post-pandemic situation.